But if there's anything you missed or you said, oh, wait a minute, I remember something that, I would like to hear reiterated, then you can always go back and look at the Q&A session, okay? So I am going to, let's see, where's the question that you asked, Elizabeth? Did you keep it?
No. But I remember what it was.
Okay, I want to make sure I get to that one because it was like really burning and you're like, please answer my question. And again, excuse me, we will make sure if your questions are not answered tonight, we'll circle back to you and make sure you get them. All right, so our first question is about recycling. Why are e-waste shred events only in Northern Durham? Why not also have these in Southern Durham? So I assume, Wayne, that would be your question.
Okay, well, I will tell you that it's a challenge from a logistical standpoint. We have to have somewhere where we can have, good traffic flow in and out, make sure that it's safe for folks who are, stopping and getting things out and so on. We are looking at other locations though, because we agree we would like to try and do this in other parts of the city as well. So, one thing I will say, so here's not quite related, but we're looking at doing drop-off locations this year for Christmas trees. So,
That's interesting.
more to come.
This isn't a question, I don't know if it's in here yet, but I am curious about how the decision is made of the frequency, how frequent you have the shredding events. How is that decided?
It's, again, really just a balance between cost and demand or need for the service. We're trying to offer it often enough so that people don't, get bogged down with holding materials for too long. But every time we run an event, we've got staff, we've got portable toilets, different things, fees that we have to pay.
Okay, how long have you been doing that program? Do you know?
Wow, I've been with the department, you may know better than me, but.
It's been, honestly, 10 or 11 years. There was one back at the Renaissance Parkway back before that got filled with big bus. That was
Right.
the one in South Durham. It's
Okay.
been a while.
Okay, let's see. How has China's barring of U.S. recycled goods and imports affected Durham recycling?
That's you, that's not me.
I was gonna say,
I
don't worry,
know.
you'll get one.
I'm not worried.
So, well, China's, the embargo has had an impact on everybody. As I mentioned before, it's less pronounced maybe for us in the southeast because we have markets available here. But when you have supply that is greater than demand, it's still gonna push down prices. I think the biggest thing, or the biggest places that it hit, to be honest, was the West Coast, because they had become very accustomed to putting things in the shipping containers that were coming across the Pacific. And I had read a figure that they could send material from Los Angeles to China less expensively than they could truck it from Los Angeles to San Diego.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very inexpensive because these containers are going back empty almost always. So it's drove down prices. I'll give you an example. We talked about the dreaded plastic bag, and I think we all would prefer that they not be used, get the reusable totes. But if you do have plastic film, there are places that can be donated. And a lot of that goes into the plastic lumber. If you've seen the Trex brand, for example, at the home improvement stores, it's made out of plastic bags primarily. And they're actually expanding their demand. They're in Virginia. So again, it's not too distant from us. But there's lots of paper mills. We talked about Sunoco, where our material goes. They also have paper mills. They make products as well as process. So.
I have some other questions about what you're talking about here, but I want to make sure I get to the other questions. They're some of my personal questions.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a Tobin question. Okay. It says, I know you are an office of one, but is there any effort being put toward the Durham City and County governments adopting a circular economy strategy? It just seems like such a Durham thing to do.
I think this is kind of a team question here. I don't think that there is anything official as far as adopting a strategy at this point. It's not at that level of the radar, but there's a lot of discussion about it. There's an active grassroots coalition of different people and organizations who are interested in this. For people who don't know what the circular economy is, it's basically that one person's trash is another person's treasure, and that you could be reusing things more locally. So instead of sending them even to Virginia or something, that would be more a local, or maybe even a North Carolina, where there are markets, it's job creation, and then we're not shipping things back and forth all over the place. And it also makes people who are making things think differently about how they make them, about what's gonna happen to this thing when I'm done with it. Is this made out of a material that can be reused or remade into something locally? Is it something that can be taken apart easily, or is it all mushed with a bunch of plastic and metal and paper together, and that makes it very hard to separate? So it kind of then makes it more of a thoughtful all-around process and conserves energy and water and materials all in that. So it is great. There is more activity on this going on in Charlotte, and we're paying attention to what's happening in Charlotte, but we're not at the point yet where we have any kind of policies on the horizon. Would you agree with everything?
Yeah, and I'll just emphasize again, do remember the hierarchy. It's reduce, reuse, and then recycle.
Yeah.
So we provide the recycling service because, you know, you can't really do that yourself, but you can reduce and you can reuse on an individual basis. So the more of that you can do, the less there is that we need to be focused on.
Those are good tips to remember that hierarchy part, and that does sound very Durham, you know, so.
Indeed.
Let's talk about something else that's still very Durham. Tobin or Wayne, if you want to share, but I'm sure Tobin may be a little bit familiar about the urban open space plan and what are the criteria for participation? How does it work on the ground, so to speak?
Yeah, so that is actually not under me. It is under both planning and then the open space division of my department. I showed you there were the 5 divisions. So like I said earlier, I only know enough about this to be dangerous, but they're working right now to identify some of the projects, and I really can't say too much more about that because it's not under me.
And it's under the county. If you go into the county, on the county's website, you can Google it and you can pull up the contact person's name and all the information.
Yeah.
And I can follow up on that question. I just knew that she was
Yeah.
in your shop, and so
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had like a little bit
bit.
to talk about on it. So let's go back into recycling a little bit more. How do you choose a recycling processor?
Well, in this region, right now, there are only 2, Sunoco and Waste Management. Sunoco, you know, we seek out bids occasionally. We're required to as a public sector agency. And the last time that was bid, they had the best proposal in terms of the mix of materials, the revenue sharing, that I mentioned are cost sharing now, but revenue sharing, and so that was who we selected at that time. I can only tell you that most of the communities in the Triangle use Sunoco. There's only one that I know of that uses Waste Management, which is not to say that they're bad, but there's a reason I guess people like using Sunoco.
Okay. Let's talk about recycling again, but related to Durham Public Schools. Do either of you know if Durham Public Schools actually recycles?
That's a great question. So, yes and no. They do have a program, theoretically, but it is, it's just very decentralized, and so much happens at each individual school, so there's not very good, I guess maybe enforcement or education. You know, it takes a lot for people to learn what they can and can't put in their bins. I have 2 kids who are in the public school system, and I go into their classrooms and I'm always like, oh my gosh, why are there so many paper towels in your recycling bin? And it's sort of, again, with some of the wish cycling or just kids not paying attention. So it's just really tough. Some schools are doing a really, really good job of it, but it's usually when internally their own staff care a lot about it to make it happen. There is concern that the janitorial custodians will take the recycling out with the trash, which happens in businesses all the time. I hear this a lot. I'm sure you probably hear it a lot too. And there was an effort a couple years ago to make sure that that wasn't happening. But again, if no one is really overseeing that very well, then it's hard to make that happen.
You mentioned that some schools are doing well. If a person wants to start an initiative or
Yeah.
make that type of movement in their school,
Mhm.
how do you maybe suggest them to do that?
Well, really the good thing is to talk to the administration at the school and make sure that they're on board, because if your principal and your vice principal aren't on board, it's not going to go anywhere. You really have to have that support. There are resources available online through Durham Public School as well as through Keep Durham Beautiful. That was a whole handbook that was put together on how to do recycling at your school. So there's a lot of resources to help if that's what you wanna do. Usually it does involve forming some kind of committee of kids, like a green team, and they're the ones who are going around doing presentations in the classroom so that people know what they should and shouldn't recycle. They can do competitions of classrooms, you know, who's doing it best, things like that. So I think starting at that administrative level is a really good place to start. There are even some schools who have been doing lunchroom or composting and diverting of food waste and milk containers. Milk is heavy and kids don't drink all their milk, and if you just pour out the milk, you can recycle the container. So some schools have been doing that. That is also, it comes and goes because as students learn what to do, but then they go off and graduate, you have a new crop of students, you kind of always are continually having to do that education part, and that is hard to sustain.
So, you know, that's a recommendation of how they could actually just get involved and connect with administration, because evidently that's where the difference is made.
Yeah.
And how they can make a change.
Durham Public Schools had a sustainability position, and that person left, and that position wasn't filled.
Oh, okay. That's
The other thing
interesting.
I might just add,
Okay.
again, it would be challenging probably to get a new program started now also because of the decreased value. They may end up having to pay for the service and may not have the funds to do it.
Well,
So-
all of the schools have recycling dumpsters already that are getting pulled. It's just whether or not enough stuff is getting diverted into it versus being thrown in the dumpsters. So you're not totally starting from scratch, but the incentive to do it from a cost-saving point of view is not really there.
Right, and I'm sure that's a consistent conversation with all our local governments and those types of entities. That conversation comes up all the time, and it's very important. It boils down to the decisions and how you all want to see your money used, and so that's always something in the back of our mind, not in the back, the front of our minds. I'm not get burned up here for that one. So let's switch to yard waste. Why is there a fee for yard waste pickup? And what if I have yard waste, just a one-time situation for my yard waste, but I can't fit it in my car? What are your recommendations?
Okay, well, as far as the fee for service, I'm not 100% sure of the original origin of that. I think the key thinking though was that, you know, everybody does require trash. Everybody would like to receive recycling, but you may have a lot where you just don't generate that much yard waste. And so you don't need the service, and so I think the thinking was, we'll charge a fee for those who want to have it, and you know, try and help support it that way. It's kind of, again, you have to look at where the tax dollars are going and how much people want to see us spend on it. We do, if you subscribe to the service, you get 2, I'll say free, but obviously it's included in the cost, bulky brush collections. If you have a large amount, you can call in and request a collection. One of our folks will look at it and give a cost estimate. So it might be, you know, $25, $50 to pick it up and take it away.
That's interesting.
What is considered yard waste, so I can make sure I know what?
Well, probably the best thing, if you don't mind, is jump on our website, because there may be a few things that I would forget, but the primary things that people have are tree limbs, hedge trimmings, you know, leaves in the fall, sometimes grass clippings.
So if due to whether a tree falls and I get it cut up, the city would charge me to come pick it up?
Well, it really depends. If it's in the right of way, you know, the city crews after a storm, they're gonna go
Right.
out and clear what's in the right of way. But if it's on your private property, then yeah, it would be a charge to, once you've brought it out to the curb, if that's what you mean.
You know, when there's like a big hurricane and there's a massive amount of that stuff, then the city will come and
Right.
pick that up usually,
There
right?
is usually a period of time where fees will be waived, we'll do collections. So it just, if you're talking a severe weather event where there's been,
A weather event in general?
yeah. But the best thing is just always, again, check our website or the Facebook page or whatever, that there's always information about when it's, you know, available with no charge and that sort of thing.
So we're actually running out of time, honestly, and we have a lot of great questions that I'm going to make sure we get to. This is an interesting question to end on. I actually live off Highway 70 near Leesville Road, and I saw the new solar panels, and I'm part of the public relations team, so I saw the news release too. The solar panels that are on the
Fire station.
EMS fire station off of Leesville Road, and this question related to solar panels that maybe both of you all can tap into. Is there any incentive in Durham for solar panel use for residents?
Nope. That's the short answer. We don't have any incentives to do it, but there are incentives. There are tax incentives from the federal government, they're ending, and the state government. And then there are new incentives by Duke Energy. There was a bill passed last summer, House Bill 589, and that included like a rebate for solar. You can now lease solar panels, so if you don't have the money to put the money up front, you can lease them over time. It does cost you more, like it does with anything else you lease, because you're paying an interest rate on that, but it still might make sense if you don't have the money up front. So there are some financial incentives out there, but the city and county don't provide any.
And are there any additional plans? I know the city led the solar panel project for the EMS fire station location off Leesville Road. Are there any further plans for the city or to do something else like that on other buildings?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, both the city and county have renewable energy resolutions that were adopted and have goals, and those resolutions specifically call for creating a plan on how we're gonna meet those goals, and meeting those goals is definitely gonna involve installing more solar. Also a lot of efficiency, because just like with recycling, reducing is the best way you can achieve anything. So by reducing our energy use, that's the first thing we wanna do, and then generate what we can through renewables. And so both the city and county will be working a lot more on how to make that happen. Some of it will be on-site on our own facilities, some of it may very well be a solar farm somewhere. We don't know yet what that's gonna look like, but yes.
What I can tell you, again, it's not in my department, but the city is actively right now, they've been looking at the roof structures, make sure that they're well-designed to have panels installed on them. They're getting cost estimates and looking at the payback, because if it's got a 40-year payback, then it may not be something they want to invest in. If it's short-term, shorter term.
Yeah, and actually the city also got a grant recently related to resilience. So we talked about climate change and how we're trying to reduce our emissions and make climate change not so bad, but no matter what we do, climate change is here, and we are having effects and will be having effects. And my office worked with our regional partners on a resilience assessment of what are the climate impacts we'll see locally. Like, we're not dealing with sea level rise because we don't have a coast, but we are dealing with other things. And what are the resources or the assets we have that are impacted by those things? And so then the city applied for a grant related to resilience to pilot solar panels on, they're looking at City Hall and another emergency, like EMS, fire station or something like that, and partner them with battery storage as a way that when the power is out, can it provide that resilience that the government needs to continue doing our work. And so that's a small scale effort that's also related to this resilience. How do we make ourselves stronger so that we won't be as badly impacted by climate issues?
All right, well, Tobin and Wayne, thank you all so much for this opportunity to come and share with our group. And again, we'll follow up with your questions.
And what is that gonna look like? You're sending them to us and we're gonna respond to them? Or?
Yes.